Hi everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Chriselle and I'm the marketing manager here at Aqua Data Studio. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, AI-powered self-serve analytics, powerful insights and affordable access. Joining us today is Darren Fulmer, a solutions engineer at Aqua Data Studio, bringing over 17 years of experience supporting IDE software solutions from Idera, Quest, and Dell. Darren will provide actionable strategies and practical insights to help you leverage AI for database development. We are looking forward to showing you what's possible, but before we get started, just a quick reminder that we'll be hosting a short Q&A at the end of the event. Please submit any questions you have using the questions panel during the webinar. After the session, visit aquadatastudio.com to sign up for a free trial of the latest version. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on demand after the event. So let's dive in. Darren, over to you.
Thank you, Chriselle. And hello, everyone, and welcome. As Chriselle mentioned, I am Darren Fulmer. I am a solution engineer here at Aqua Data Studio. And I've spent years working closely with DBAs, developers, and analysts. And I've seen firsthand how powerful tooling can make or break a data-driven team. So today we're going to explore how Aqua Data Studio is evolving to meet those needs, specifically how AI is now embedded directly into the platform to make self-serve analytics smarter, faster, and more accessible to everyone in your organization. With our latest updates, we've introduced AI Assist and other features designed to help users, from business analysts to database pros, interact with data in more natural ways. And you'll see how someone can say something like, add a filter for Q2 sales in plain language, and Aqua will understand it, write the query, and even help visualize those results. If you've used Aqua Data Studio before, you know it's a robust cross-platform database IDE that supports over 40 different database systems. And whether you're on Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, it doesn't matter. We have a flavor for you. But this AI-powered layer changes the game. It bridges the gap between human intuition and technical execution. It's all about reducing friction between the question and the query, the data and the chart, the user and the insight. So why is this important right now? Because modern data teams are overwhelmed. Data volumes are growing, platforms are more complex, and decision makers need insights faster than ever. So traditional tools alone just can't keep up. So self-service has been talked about for years, but let's be honest, true self-serve hasn't been easy to deliver. Either the tools were too technical or too disconnected from real data workflows. And that's why we've embedded intelligence where people already work, in Aqua Data Studio itself. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to go ahead and walk you through how AI Assist works, how users can explore data without SQL expertise, how Aqua Files and governed sources support structure, and how visual analytics bring it all together. But I also want you to think about, how much of your time is spent answering repeat questions, or how often do analysts hit roadblocks waiting for someone to fix or optimize a query? What if you could offload those common tasks to an intelligent assistant? freeing up your time and helping your users move faster with fewer mistakes and more confidence. That's the vision we're going to explore today. And by the end of this session, I really hope you'll see just how achievable it is. So let's kick things off by zooming out for a moment to look at the broader shift that's happening in our industry. Across nearly every organization, in every sector, we're seeing a strong move toward what we call user-led or self-service analytics. And what does that actually mean, in practice? It means empowering users, regardless of technical skill, to interact directly with data. It's about creating a world where a marketing director, a finance lead, or even someone in customer success can get the answers they need without having to open a support ticket or wait for an analyst to become available. So let's contrast that with how things traditionally worked. So imagine a sales manager wants a breakdown of quarterly revenue by region. They typically email the data team, who would then interpret the request, write a query, run the results, and send it back in a spreadsheet. However, there's always something missing, perhaps the wrong date range or the filter needs adjusting. Now it's a follow-up email, perhaps another iteration. Suddenly, a simple question has turned into a 3-day exchange. Multiply that by dozens or even hundreds of similar requests across the business, and you can see how quickly IT and analytics teams become overwhelmed. Not because the questions are difficult, but because the system is inefficient. Self-service analytics change that model completely. Now the person with the question can go straight to the data, use a guided tool, type a plain language request, or even modify an existing query and get an answer in minutes instead of days. And this doesn't eliminate the need for the data teams. On the contrary, it frees them up to go do deeper, more impactful work, such as optimization, modeling, or strategic data governance. And this shift isn't limited to your data savvy departments either. This transformation is spreading across every part of the organization: HR, finance, operations, supply chain, and marketing. All of these teams are becoming more data-driven, and they all need tools that match that expectation. And this movement we're talking about isn't just a trend, it's a response to a real and growing demand. A demand for faster access, smarter tools, and greater independence when it comes to working with data. And that's exactly where Aqua Data Studio fits in. So now let's talk about the flip side. Self-service analytics sounds amazing, empowering users, freeing up IT, getting answers faster. But the reality is, it's not always easy to achieve. One of the biggest challenges is a lack of technical literacy. So many users, including experienced professionals, are unfamiliar with SQL. Or maybe they know just enough to get started, but they quickly get stuck when the query gets complex or when they hit an unfamiliar data model. Even when someone knows what they want, such as our top customers from last quarter, they don't always know how to ask for it in a way that translates to a database query. Is it by revenue, order count, Which region? What defines a customer as top? These ambiguities turn what should be a simple request into a drawn-out email thread. And the burden usually falls on the data team. They get pulled in to interpret requests, clarify requirements, manually generate results. It's not that the task is hard, it's that it's repetitive and inefficient. And when you scale that across dozens or hundreds of similar requests, it becomes a bottleneck. And furthermore, there's a deeper issue: data fragmentation. In many organizations, you'll find multiple versions of the same metric. Revenue might be calculated one way in finance, a different way in marketing, and a third way in someone's spreadsheet. And suddenly that same report shows 3 different numbers. And that's how trust starts to break down. People begin to question the accuracy of the reports or the reliability of the system. They might start pulling data into Excel and creating their own trusted versions, which only amplifies the chaos. This also creates real risk regarding governance. Without centralized standards, people can misinterpret data, overlook critical filters, or expose sensitive information, often without realizing it. And these aren't edge cases. These are everyday problems for modern organizations. And they're exactly the kinds of challenges that Aqua Data Studio is designed to address by making data access easier, safer, and more consistent for everyone involved. So how does Aqua Data Studio enable the self-service? So now that we've looked at the problem and the opportunity, let's go ahead and shift to the solution and how Aqua Data Studio fits into this movement towards self-service analytics. What really sets Aqua apart is its ability to serve both technical and non-technical users in the same environment. It brings together a powerful set of tools in a way that is both intuitive and accessible. So let's start with the technical folks. For your DBAs, data engineers and developers, Aqua is a full-featured SQL IDE. The query analyzer gives them everything they need: syntax highlighting, execution plans, tuning tools, a flexible editor that helps them write and debug complex queries. And for users who may not want to write SQL from scratch, or who prefer a more visual experience, Aqua offers the Visual Query Builder. And this enables users to drag and drop tables visually, define joins, set filters, and build queries. It's great for users who understand data logic but aren't fluid in SQL syntax. Then you have what I like to call the guidance layer, which is where Aqua really shines for self-service users. Things like Aqua files. And these are shareable, reusable templates that help guide users through commonly needed queries or analysis paths. It's like giving someone a pre-built framework they can tweak and run safely, rather than starting from scratch and risking breaking something. So you've also got governed data sources, which play a critical role. And these ensure that everyone is connecting to the correct database, pulling from the appropriate views and tables, and applying the correct filters. And you can think of it as guardrails for self-service. Users have freedom, but they're not off-roading. But Aqua's utility doesn't stop with querying. It's a complete environment for working with data. You can compare database schemas side by side. You can use an ER modeling tool to map out structures visually. Commit your SQL scripts to version control, and even collaborate on query development and review, all within a single workspace. That end-to-end support, from exploration to documentation to collaboration, is what really makes Aqua Data Studio stand out. And it's also incredibly versatile. Aqua supports over 40 different database platforms out of the box. So whether your environment includes SQL Server, Oracle, PostgreSQL, MongoDB, Snowflake, or all of the above, your team can use a single tool that alone can simplify training, reduce context switching, and make standardization a whole lot easier. So, all right, and this is where things really start to get exciting, because now we're moving beyond traditional query tools into something truly next generation, AI Assist. And this is Aqua Data Studio's built-in intelligent assistant. It's designed to help users, regardless of their SQL skill level, to write and refine queries using plain natural language. So instead of writing out a complex SQL, like a complex SQL where clause, someone might just type in, show me customers who made frequent online purchases in the last 18 months. And behind the scenes, AI Assist interprets that request. It determines the intent, matches it with your data model, and generates the SQL needed to return the right results. No syntax memorization, no hunting for table names or field codes, just straightforward interaction. And it doesn't stop there. You can continue the conversation with the AI. You might say, are these customers also our highest spenders, or break it down by region, or something along those lines. And AI Assist will take your existing query and build on it. And this type of fluid back and forth interaction enables users to explore their data more naturally. What's impressive is how this opens the door for non-technical users. People who would normally need to ask IT or copy and paste something from an Excel template can now start querying on their own safely and confidently. And for technical users, it's just as useful, because now you have a co-pilot that helps generate, debug, or even optimize SQL faster. It's a huge productivity boost. So instead of rewriting the same boilerplate code, they can prompt the AI and make refinements based on that. And here's the key point. AI Assist doesn't replace SQL. It enhances your access to it. It bridges the gap between data curiosity and technical ability. So instead of being a bottleneck, the query process becomes a gateway to insights for everyone on your team. It's the difference between needing to speak a programming language fluently and simply being able to ask a question and get a data-driven answer. And that's the kind of shift that unlocks scale, speed, and confidence in your analytics efforts. So building on that, let's talk more about this idea of translating plain language into SQL, because this is truly a leap forward for usability. For a long time, the barrier to accessing data has been technical. If you didn't know SQL, you had to rely on someone who did. And that's changing now, thanks to AI-driven tools like Aqua's AI Assist. So here's what this looks like in practice. A user might say something as simple as, show me sales by region over the past year. That's it. No semicolons, no join conditions, no guessing which data table to use, just intent in their own words. And AI Assist takes that request, interprets the meaning, identifies the relevant fields and the tables in your schema, and it writes a fully formed SQL query. Additionally, it displays the query to the user. And here's where the magic happens. Over time, users start to learn. They begin to see how the words they use, like sales, region, or past year, map to SQL syntax, to logic, and to filtering. It becomes a kind of passive training experience. They don't need to enroll in a SQL bootcamp. They learn by doing, seeing their own questions translated into real code. And the more they use the tool, the more comfortable they become. They begin to tweak the queries themselves, explore new variations, or get curious about how to add filters or groupings. In other words, they become more data literate just by interacting with the platform. And let me emphasize, this isn't about eliminating SQL or dumbing anything down. It's about making it approachable. You're still getting robust, accurate, performant queries, but now more people can be part of that process. The result is a more empowered user base, a lighter load for the technical team, and a much faster path from question to insight. And this is what modern self-service looks like. Not just access to data, but understanding of data through every interaction. So now we've seen how users can go from plain language to SQL. But let's take it one step further. What happens after the query? Usually, once you get your data, you want to make sense of it visually. You want to spot trends, identify outliers, compare performance across groups. That's where visualization comes in. And traditionally, this is where things get clunky. You write a query, copy the results into an Excel sheet, for example, open up a charting tool or a BI platform, and start building visuals from scratch. Not only is that time consuming, but it also breaks your flow. You're moving between tools, losing context, and often duplicating effort. With Aqua Data Studio, that gap is closed. You can go from SQL to charts in the same workspace without exporting or switching apps. It's a seamless workflow. And once your query is built, whether manually or with AI Assist, you can immediately start creating visualizations. It's as simple as dragging and dropping fields into a canvas. So let's say you just asked, what are our monthly sales by region over the past year? Natural language. Once that query is run, Aqua Data Studio lets you switch straight into charting mode. So you can create a line chart showing the trends or a stacked column chart to compare regions side by side. This is powerful for several reasons. First, it shortens the feedback loop, allowing you to see if the results match your expectations instantly. If something appears incorrect, you can adjust the query and refresh the chart. It makes exploratory analysis much more interactive. Second, it helps you communicate insights. Not everyone understands raw numbers or rows of SQL output, but almost everyone can interpret a well-labeled bar chart or a heat map. And this makes it easier for users to present their findings in meetings, reports, or strategy discussions without needing help from a BI team. And finally, all of this stays within the Aqua environment. There's no new tool to learn, no additional licenses, no exporting, reformatting, or worrying about whether your data got out of sync. It's a single end-to-end environment where you can ask a question in natural language, get the SQL to pull out the data to get an answer, then you can visualize it right where you're working. And that's what we mean when we say we're bringing self-service analytics to life. So now let's talk about one of the most underrated but critical parts of enabling self-service: how people get started. Because let's face it, staring at a blank screen is intimidating. Even with a powerful tool in front of them, many users freeze up when they're asked to go explore the data. They're unsure where to start, which tables to use, or how to phrase their question in a way that gets them what they need. And that's where structured starting points become essential. In Aqua Data Studio, we support this in two major ways. First, we provide users with Aqua files, which are reusable query templates that can be shared across teams. Now, while I won't go into the exact examples here, what you need to know is this: these templates provide you a head start. Instead of building something from the ground up, users open a file that already has the structure and logic in place. They tweak the filters, date ranges, or regions to match their specific needs. Think about how much time that saves, not only for the user, but for the person who would have had to build that query from scratch every time someone asked for it. These Aqua files preserve institutional knowledge. They standardize how things are calculated, and they help users work smarter, not harder. The second piece is even more foundational: governed data access or data sources. These ensure that users are connected to trusted, curated views of the data. So let me give you an example. Without governance, one user might pull sales data from a raw transactions table, while another pulls from a summary view that includes refunds. Both think they're looking at sales, but they're actually getting different answers. And such inconsistencies cause confusion. They create reporting conflicts and erode trust in the numbers. With governed data sources, you can define exactly which tables, views, columns users have access to, and pre-apply filters or logic where needed. So when they start working, they're already in the right sandbox. They don't have to guess, and they're not accidentally pulling from outdated or incomplete data. And this is is huge for scaling self-service safely. You want users to be empowered, but also aligned. Structured templates and governed access help you achieve both. The bottom line is you're not just handing someone a car, you're giving them a GPS, a seatbelt, and a map. And that's how we make self-service analytics not only powerful, but practical and secure. So let's shift gears now and talk a little bit about what all of this means for your team, especially the folks who are typically the bottleneck in the analytics process, your DBAs, your analysts, and IT support staff. When we discuss self-service analytics or discuss self-service, one of the most significant downstream benefits is a reduced support load. And that's not just a nice to have, it can fundamentally change how your data teams operate. Think about how much time your technical staff spends answering ad hoc data questions. Can you tweak this report? Can you add a filter for the region? Can you rerun that query with a new date range? On their own, these requests are small, but they add up over time and they erode the focus and productivity of your technical team. Instead of working on long-term optimization projects or data architecture improvements, they're constantly reacting to requests from across the organization. But when your users have the tools and the confidence to answer their questions, that's when the fundamental shift happens. Support tickets go down, interruptions go down. The data team can then reallocate its time to more strategic work. Aqua Data Studio makes this possible by providing users with a unified workspace where they can write, modify, visualize, and save queries, all without requiring handholding. It empowers them while also protecting data integrity through governed sources and templates. But there's another side to this as well: stronger collaboration. Self-service doesn't mean everyone working in isolation. In Aqua, users can share their Aqua files with teammates, allowing others to build off their work. They can use version control to track query changes, see what's been modified, and even roll back if needed. And that kind of visibility is incredibly helpful, especially when onboarding new team members or collaborating across departments. It eliminates the classic problem of who wrote this query or which version are we using. It also fosters a shared understanding of the data. When teams can see, comment on, and evolve queries together, it encourages better standards, clearer logic, and fewer duplicated efforts. That's where what we're seeing in Aqua Data Studio is not only reducing the reactive burden on your technical staff, but it also strengthens the way your organization works with data as a team. It turns analytics into a collaborative discipline rather than a dependency chain. Now that we've seen what Aqua can do with AI, everything from natural language queries to visualizations and guided templates, let's talk about what's required to actually use it. And the short answer is very little. Aqua Data Studio has taken a very thoughtful approach to AI integration. Starting in version 25.0, AI Assist is already embedded directly into the platform. There's no separate download, no new interface to learn, and no additional BI tool to configure. If you have the latest version, you already have access to this functionality. However, To activate AI Assist, users do need to provide their own OpenAI API key. This is important because it gives organizations full control and transparency over how the AI is accessed. And that means your usage of the AI is completely isolated. It's not shared across customers, and your API limits and OpenAI account policies govern it. You get to decide when, how, and how much the feature is used. You're not relying on Aqua to act as a middle layer, which reduces risk and complexity from a security and compliance perspective. From an enterprise standpoint, this is a huge win. You don't need to set up a cloud environment or build a custom connector to leverage AI with your data platform. It's already there, natively integrated into the Aqua workspace your teams are already familiar with. And again, it's all in the same tool. That means no context switching, no bouncing between SQL editors, visualization tools, and AI copilots. Everything, writing queries, adapting logic, creating visuals, and collaborating is done within one single platform. This simplicity translates into faster adoption, smoother onboarding, and less burden on your IT team. You don't need to train people on 3 new tools or manage permissions across 4 platforms. It's all centralized, secure, and efficient. And for your business users, the experience is seamless. They don't have to think about whether AI is on or not. It's just part of the way Aqua works now. Ask a question, get a result, visualize it, share it. So when we say Aqua is enterprise ready, this is what we mean. You get smart capabilities that fit naturally into your workflow without requiring heavy setup or disruptive changes to your environment. So let's go ahead and recap with a quick summary. With Aqua Data Studio's AI-powered self-service features, you're enabling users to ask questions in plain English and get real SQL results. You can instantly visualize those results with drag and drop tools. You can start from structured templates that guide safe exploration. You can collaborate more effectively through shared queries and version control. And you do all of this with no extra tools, no new setup, and no added complexity. This is how you bring true self-service to life by meeting users where they are, supporting them with intelligence, and connecting them to governed data sources. So now we come to the part where we can go ahead and answer your questions that came up, because I know we covered a lot of information. So let's go ahead and take those questions from the question box. Chriselle, if you could go ahead and check for those questions and read those off to me, we'll see what we can answer.
Yes, sure, I'll get to it. So thank you so much, Darren, and that was really great walkthrough of how Aqua Data Studio's AI-powered assistance is making true self-serve analytics a reality. We saw how business users can independently write or modify queries, build visualization, and generate reports without relying on the IT or data teams. The result? Faster insights, reduced bottlenecks, and more time for technical teams to focus on high-impact work. Now that we are just about to jump into the Q&A portion of the session, we would just like to answer a few questions. So we would like to take a poll, and you would see a survey pop up. Do reply to it. I'll give you a minute or so. Okay, let's go to the next question. And we have the last poll. Okay, thank you for your answers. Here are a few questions that we've received, Darren. So the first one is, how does Aqua Data Studio's AI handle ambiguous or vague natural language requests?
Thanks, Grisel. That's a common concern and a smart one, actually, because the Aqua Data Studio's AI is designed to prompt users for clarification when a request is too vague or could be interpreted multiple ways. So, for example, if a user says something along the lines of "show sales by product," but the system detects that there are multiple sales tables or product dimensions, it may ask for clarification or offer actual suggestions based on available metadata. So the goal isn't to guess, it's to assist. So the AI acts more like a co-pilot, not to be confused with co-pilot, but a co-pilot, as in a plane, to not replace human judgment, if that makes sense.
Okay. And the second question we have received is, what's the difference between using visual query builder and using AI for query generation?
So that's a great question. The Visual Query Builder is a drag and drop interface that helps users build queries without writing SQL. By selecting tables, joins, filters, and fields as an example. And it's great for users who prefer structure or need to understand the underlying schema. The AI Query Assistant, or the AI Assist, on the other hand, allows users to express their request in plain language, such as add a filter for last quarter or group results by region. It's more conversational and intuitive. Both tools can be used together. For example, you might start with AI and then fine tune using the Visual Query Builder, or vice versa.
Okay, and we have one last question. Can Aqua Data Studio's self-serve features be locked down or limited for certain users?
So yes, so Aqua Data Studio gives you multiple layers of control. While users can register databases and explore freely in personal environments, in enterprise settings, admins often control access through shared Aqua files or read-only data sources, or even custom roles at the database level. So even though the tool is self-service friendly, it's also governance friendly. So you can make sure users explore the right data with the right permissions without losing oversight.
Got it. Perfect. So we are just about out of time. So I've added Darren and our sales team's email ID into the chat. Thanks again for joining us today. And I'd like to thank Darren for the beautiful presentation. This webcast has been recorded and you'll receive an email with the recording link within the next week. We hope to see you for future sessions, and check the event section on our resource page to see what's upcoming. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us. I hope you saw how Aqua Data Studio brings powerful analytics to the people who need it without adding work for the folks who support it. If you want to learn more, please visit our webpage. There's videos, product updates, all that kind of documentation. And of course, we're here to help if you have any follow-up questions, feedback, or would like to schedule a more in-depth discussion with your team. Have a great day, everybody.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Simona, and I'm from the marketing team here at Aqua Data Studio. I'd like to welcome you to our session today, How to Build Flexibility into Your Data Stack, lesson from Sybase ACE and Azure Data Studio. Joining us today is Darren Fulmer, a solution engineer at Aqua Data Studio. He'll be presenting how Aqua Data Studio helps you manage migration, maintain productivity, and unify your environment without workflow loss. We're looking forward to showing you what's possible, but before we get started, just a quick reminder that we'll be hosting a short Q&A at the end of the event. Please submit any question you have using the question panel during the webinar. After the session, you can visit aquadatastudio.com to sign up for a free trial of the latest version. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on demand after the event. Let's dive in. Darren, over to you.
Thank you, Simona, for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining. So to kick things off, let me take a moment to frame what this session is really going to be about. The title says we're talking about flexibility in your data stack. But in reality, we are talking about the pressure every data team is feeling as tools evolve, retire, or shift direction in ways that we cannot control. Thanks again for joining, and I appreciate everyone taking time out of their day because this topic affects almost every data team right now. We are in a period where the tools we depend on are changing faster than ever. Some are being retired quietly, some are losing investment, others are becoming harder to support because the community around them is shrinking. And nothing shows this better than two real examples, Sybase ASE on the database side and Azure Data Studio on the tooling side. Neither of these disappeared overnight, but both have reached a point where organizations are being pushed to rethink parts of their stack, whether they wanted to or not. So my goal today goes beyond simply explaining what is happening. I want to help you understand why these shifts are happening, what they teach us, and how you can use these lessons to design a more flexible and resilient environment. This is about lowering risk, reducing disruption, and gaining control of your roadmap. If you take away one idea from today, it is that flexibility is not something you patch in at the end. It is something you intentionally design into your workflows so that change becomes manageable instead of chaotic. So let me start by walking you through what we will cover today so you know exactly where we are headed. This agenda is structured to build up the story step by step rather than jumping straight into tooling. We will begin with the bigger picture and look at the evolution that is happening around all of us. And this helps ground the conversation so the rest of the material makes more sense. Then we will move into two real case studies. Sybase ASE and Azure Data Studio are both hitting different kinds of transitions. And they provide real lessons for what happens when tools reach end of life or lose support. After that, we'll talk about what really happens behind the scenes when a vendor deprecates a tool. The reality is never as simple as swapping tool A for tool B. There are workflow impacts, capability gaps, and ripple effects inside your team. Then we'll shift into what it means to design flexibility into your data stack. This is the core of the conversation. It is about building an environment that absorbs change instead of being broken by it. And finally, we will talk about how Aqua Data Studio fits into this flexibility mindset, not as a single point replacement, but as a tool that helps you simplify, standardize, and prepare your environment for the future. And we will close with the main takeaways you can bring back to your team. So the title of this slide is The Evolution Reality. And it is a reality every one of us lives with. Technology does not sit still. Progress brings new capabilities, but it also makes older tools obsolete. And the interesting part is how uneven this evolution is across an organization. You can have highly modernized systems living right next to applications that have barely been updated in 10 years. You can have a cloud data warehouse sitting alongside a legacy on-prem transactional system that is 2 decades old, and for a long time, that mix is manageable. But eventually, one of those older systems becomes the bottleneck. It may be security updates slowing down, it may be hardware becoming more expensive, or just the talent pool shrinking. The real challenge is not that things evolve. The challenge is whether your tools and your architecture can absorb that evolution. Teams that build rigid, single-purpose environments often find themselves scrambling when a vendor changes course. Everything becomes reactive, costly, and stressful. But the teams that build in room to grow are the ones who shift with minimal disruption. They can swap out components without rebuilding everything. They can modernize at their own pace. And that is the flexibility mindset we are talking about today. So this next slide highlights just how fast change is happening. And the slide title says it clearly, the pace of change. The clearest example right now is AI. In less than 2 years, we went from GPT 3.5 to GPT 4, then 4.0, now 5. And suddenly there are multimodal models from multiple vendors competing for dominance. Models evolve almost quarterly at this point. If you built your processes around a static model, you probably felt that pain. Something you depended on shifted out from under you and you had to adapt quickly. We have seen the same behavior in data engineering. For a decade, ETL, or extract, transform, and load pipelines dominated. Then cloud warehouses emerged, and the conversation shifted rapidly towards ELT, extract, load, transform, and modern transformation frameworks. Companies with flexible data pipelines adapted almost immediately. Companies tied to older tooling and older architecture discovered that catching up was not a minor adjustment. It often became a major overhaul. The takeaway here is simple. Change is not slowing down. Agility is no longer optional. It is part of the normal operation of your environment for data teams. And here we emphasize that architectural agility matters. And when you look at the teams that handle major transitions well, there is a pattern there. They made decisions years earlier that gave them breathing room. These teams choose tools that spanned multiple platforms. They avoided hard lock-in. They built abstraction layers where possible, so the underlying platform could change without breaking the workflow. They standardized on tooling that reduced fragmentation and gave them consistent interfaces across different environments. And this pays off during modernization projects. Instead of a 2-year crisis with high costs, the transition becomes something you can phase in without disrupting operations. Instead of training entire teams on brand new tooling, you evolve the existing environment. And instead of worrying about a vendor decision that forces your hand, you stay in control of your roadmap. And this is why agility is not a technical term, it's a strategic one. So let's take a look at 2 real-world examples that will anchor our discussion. When you look at, excuse me, when you look at Sybase ASE nearing the end of mainstream maintenance, and you look at Azure Data Studio being retired by Microsoft, you see 2 very different types of change, but the same underlying problem. Organizations are being forced to adjust their tools because the vendors have changed direction. In both cases, customers did not choose the timeline. They did not choose the strategic shift. They did not choose the retirement. They simply woke up one day and realized the tools they rely on will not be viable long term. These 2 case studies are important because they show the downstream impacts. They show what happens when the ecosystem shrinks and when updates slow. And more importantly, they show what a flexible environment makes possible compared to a rigid one. So let's talk about the decline of Sybase ASE. And it is worth calling out that Sybase ASE was once a major player in the industry. It powered financial trading systems, telecom networks, and enterprise transactional workloads for decades. It was stable, fast, and widely trusted. But over time, the signs of decline became hard to ignore. Release cycles slowed dramatically. 11 years passed between version 16.0 and 16.1. That's unheard of in modern database life cycles. The customer base shrank to under 550 organizations worldwide, and surveys show that most of the remaining customers plan to leave the platform within the next few years. And the biggest issue is the talent pool. Most Sybase professionals have already moved on to other platforms like SQL Server or Oracle. And younger engineers, they rarely train on ASE because it no longer offers any kind of career longevity. This creates a scenario where even maintaining the system becomes harder, more expensive, and riskier. The lesson here is that even strong platforms can eventually fade. And if your environment depends entirely on one tool, you eventually reach a point where change is forced instead of chosen. So where are the Sybase customers actually moving? And interestingly, most are not following the official vendor recommendation to move to SAP HANA. Instead, the migrations tend to cluster around platforms that feel familiar, stable, and well supported. SQL Server is one of the most common destinations because the migration path is relatively straightforward and the talent pool there is strong. PostgreSQL is growing rapidly as well, thanks to its low cost and strong open source community. And some organizations move to Oracle or MySQL, depending on their internal overall strategy. The pattern is clear. Organizations are choosing platforms with large communities, active development, long-term roadmaps, and plentiful expertise. They want to avoid repeating the same situation where they are dependent on a platform that may decline again. And this reinforces the broader theme that flexibility and ecosystem strength are important factors when choosing a database platform. So here we're going to highlight Azure Data Studio, which is another example of a tool hitting end of life. In early 2025, Microsoft announced that Azure Data Studio will be retired with support ending in 2026. The recommended path forward is to use Visual Studio Code with the SQL extension. Now, Visual Studio Code is a great code editor, but it is not a full database IDE. To recreate what Azure Data Studio offered, you end up installing plugins, configuring additional extensions, and stitching together functionality that used to be built in. The workflow becomes less unified and more fragmented. And for teams that rely on Azure Data Studio for querying, analytics, schema compare, and object management, this transition creates a real gap. Not because VS Code is bad, but because it is not a direct replacement. And once again, organizations do not control this timeline. They simply have to adjust to the vendor strategy. This example reinforces the importance of using tools that are not tied too closely to one vendor's internal priorities. And, this slide asks a great question. What actually happens when a tool is deprecated? The public announcement is usually short and clean, but the real impact happens quietly inside your teams. The vendor now controls the timeline. Your long-term modernization roadmap suddenly becomes urgent. Replacement tools rarely offer one-to-one feature parity, so gaps start to appear. And to fill those gaps, teams add temporary tools, manual workarounds, and custom scripts. Technical debt begins to accumulate as people try to keep things running while planning a migration. You also see a fragmentation of workflow. Instead of one tool, you now have multiple half solutions. If your team is busy, these temporary solutions often stay in place far longer than planned. All of this increases cost, introduces risk, and slows down your productivity. This is why planning for flexibility is so important before deprecation happens. So let's talk about the true cost of rigid tooling. And the biggest thing to emphasize is that the cost is not the license price. It is everything that happens around the tool. Rigid tools increase migration costs because you cannot easily shift away from them. They increase training costs because there are no natural skill paths to modern platforms. They increase operational overhead because you often need multiple tools to achieve what one unified tool used to do. And they increase risk because the timeline for change is controlled by your vendor. Over time, rigid tools create a dependency that becomes expensive and limiting. They trap organizations into older workflows and force costly decisions when change eventually comes. But there are alternatives to this. And here we're going to introduce the alternative, the idea of building for flexibility. And the key point here is that flexibility is a design choice. You can create an environment that absorbs change rather than resisting it. This means choosing tools that support multiple platforms so you are not locked into one vendor. It means avoiding tightly coupled integrations that make future migrations painful. It means preferring tools with long, consistent release histories. And it means standardizing where possible so your team is not learning new workflows for every database. This slide sets the stage for how Aqua Data Studio supports this approach. But the concept applies to any data team. The more flexible your architecture is, the more control you have over your future roadmap. So let's talk a little bit about Aqua Data Studio in the context of flexibility. Aqua Data Studio is built with the idea that teams should not have to juggle multiple tools or constantly adapt to shifting vendor roadmaps. It supports more than 40 database platforms. It works across Windows, Mac, and Linux. And it brings together querying, analytics, schema compare, version control integration, ER modeling, data editing, and much, much more inside one single application. You do not need plugins or separate tools for any of this core functionality. And the product has more than 20 years of active development, which provides a level of stability and predictability that many organizations appreciate. And because it is not tied to a single database vendor, customers have the freedom to adopt whatever platforms make sense for their strategy. And this is where the story transitions from explaining the challenge to offering a solution. So how does Aqua Data Studio help organizations that might be migrating off of Sybase ASE? Migrations can be stressful, but Aqua Data Studio reduces that friction by giving you one unified environment to manage the entire process. You can connect to your Sybase instance and your target instance right in the same interface. You can run assessments on your objects. You can compare schemas, generate migration scripts, and validate the results. You can build synthetic data for testing, so your production data stays protected. You can run side-by-side queries to compare performance and correctness. The biggest benefit is consistency. Instead of switching between multiple tools, scripts, and utilities, everything happens within one workflow. That reduces error, that shortens the project, and it helps your team stay productive. So let's look at Azure Data Studio retirement specifically. Excuse me. For teams who rely on Azure Data Studio, Aqua Data Studio provides a smooth transition because it includes every core feature Azure Data Studio offered, plus additional capabilities that many customers wanted. The query window, object browser, visual explain plans, analytics, schema compare, ER modeling tools, these are all built directly into the application. You do not need to assemble plugins or rely on extensions with varying levels of support. And because Aqua Data Studio supports multi-database environments out of the box, this is a chance to simplify your workflow. You can stop using different tools for SQL Server, Postgres, Oracle, Snowflake, and others. You get one consistent experience that reduces training overhead and improves productivity. So this slide helps us reinforce an important idea. With the right tool set, modernization does not have to be a crisis-driven event. When you use a flexible tool like Aqua Data Studio, you gain control over the pace and structure of your modernization efforts. You can evaluate new platforms without abandoning your old ones. You can phase migrations gradually. You can test workloads side by side without having to learn entirely new tools. And you can train your teams consistently instead of trying to keep up with multiple vendor-provided utilities. This approach reduces disruption and increases your options. It turns modernization from a forced reaction into an intentional, manageable process. So let's emphasize one of the most important mindset shifts in the entire presentation. When a tool is retired or a vendor changes course, most organizations focus on finding a replacement. But that approach only guarantees that you will repeat the same situation again in a few years. Instead, look at transitions as strategic upgrade opportunities. You can streamline your stack. You can consolidate tools. You can choose platforms with long roadmaps and strong communities. You can adopt workflows that span multiple databases. And this mindset gives you long-term stability. It reduces risk, it simplifies training, and it prevents you from being locked into another tool or environment that limits your options. So to close things out, let me bring together the main ideas from today. Change is not slowing down. Tools will continue to evolve. Some will be retired, some will fall behind. The question is not whether change will happen, The question is whether your environment can handle it. Rigid, single-purpose tools limit your ability to adapt. They create risk, they create cost, and they put your roadmap in the hands of the vendor. Flexible architectures give you control. They let you adopt new technologies on your own timeline. They reduce fragmentation, and they make modernization predictable instead of stressful. Aqua Data Studio is built around that idea. It supports a wide range of databases. It gives your team a unified experience, whether they're using Windows, Mac, or Linux, or any database platform that you can think of. And it helps you stay ahead of change instead of reacting to it. The goal is not just to survive transitions. The goal is to build an environment that benefits from them, and with the right tools and the right strategy, that is absolutely possible. So I want to thank everybody for the presentation. We'll go ahead and open it up to questions now. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box, or and then Simona will read them off, and I'll try to answer them here if we can.
Yeah, thanks so much, Darren. That was a really great explanation. Our organization can stay ahead of technology changes. We're just about to jump into the Q&A portion of the session. But before, I wanted to remind that today's session just focused on a small part of what Aqua Data Studio can do. As the industry-leading multifunction database tool, we offer functionality that includes over 40 features to support coding and database development, data analysis and BI, data modeling, database administration, and everything you need to function as an effective peer in a modern enterprise environment. I'll go ahead with the Q&A. We have a couple of questions. So the first question, someone is asking, with SQL Anywhere, the end of maintenance will come in 2028. Will you deliver an analog functionality for ASA?
I'm sorry, Simona, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, someone is asking, with SQL Anywhere, the end of maintenance will come in 2028. Will you deliver an analog functionality for ASA?
Yeah, so that one I will have to check with product management to see what is on the roadmap. 2028 is a little down the road, so that might be something that you know, they won't be deciding on until maybe late of next year or in 2027. You know, trying to stay on top of things that are disappearing now, and being able to provide a solution for those is the priority, of course.
Thank you. Someone else is asking, can you migrate the other way, so from Oracle to PostgreSQL?
Yeah, so it's important to know that Aqua Data Studio, it's not a migration tool. It does have a lot of capability built in to allow you to do different types of migration solutions. So you can do ER modeling, and you can convert those models and build out into different platforms. You can do imports and exports. You can do schema compares, but there's no transformation portion that you would typically see in a dedicated ETL or ELT tool. But it does give you the ability to do build out a script to generate, let's say, build out a model of Oracle, convert that model into a Postgres, and then execute that model or that script so that you can have a matching structure. And then you can do schema compares to ensure that everything is transitioned properly. You can do imports and exports of data, but again, there's no transformation. So there may be some manual adjustment there because it's not a dedicated ETL or ELT tool. I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you, Darren. Yes, I think there is a follow-up on that. So the following question is, do you actively support the migration of tables, triggers, events, store function, and store procedure from SQL Anywhere to PostgreSQL?
So again, because Aqua Data Studio, it's a IDE tool, not a dedicated ETL tool. So some of that, like your triggers and functions, that stuff's going to have to be manually done. It's with Aqua Data Studio. It can get the bulk of what you may need to do with the building of the script of your tables and views and indexes and that sort of thing. But as far as your stored procedures and functions and that, typically, that requires a more focused ETL type tool to handle all in a single step. So there may be some manual migration that you may have to do because it's not, again, a dedicated migration tool.
Thank you, Darren. I think we have time for maybe one more question, a couple of more. So someone is asking, if Azure Data Studio is being retired, why choose Aqua Data Studio instead of moving to VS Code with the SQL extension like Microsoft recommends?
So that's a good question. VS Code with the SQL extension is a general purpose editor. It's not designed to be a full database IDE. Aqua Data Studio provides an integrated experience with built-in query tools, visual explain plans, schema compare, ER modeling, debugging, and visual analytics, charting, all in one place. So you do not need to install multiple plugins or stitch together a workflow. If you want the same level of capability Azure Data Studio offered, plus a broader multi-database environment, Aqua Data Studio is a much smoother and more complete replacement than Visual Studio.
Thank you, Darren. So the last question, we use Sybase AC today. How exactly does Aqua Data Studio help with the migration if we decide to move to SQL Server, PostgreSQL, or Oracle?
Good question. Again, just to reiterate, Aqua is not a dedicated ETL tool, but it does connect to both Sybase and any one of those target platforms, all in the same interface. So you can directly compare schemas, you can synchronize objects. Again, you can generate synthetic data to do testing in that new environment that you've set up. You can script out objects. You can move your data with the import-export capability, and you can then again validate results without ever switching the tool. The product supports the entire workflow from assessment through final validation, and that reduces a lot of time, risk, and tool sprawl during that migration period. Again, if it's a large database environment with a lot of procedures, functions, that sort of thing, a dedicated ETL tool or ELT tool might be a better fit. But if it's like your test environments or whatever, Aqua Data Studio should be able to get you through any of that process.
Great, perfect, thank you. So we are just about out of time, so I'm going to pass Darren's and our sales team email address into the chat. Thanks again for joining us today. I also like to thank you, Darren, for this presentation. This webcast has been recorded, and you will receive an email with the recording link within the next week. We hope to see you again for one of our future sessions, so make sure to check the events section of our resource page, where you can find everything that's coming up. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you again all for joining today and spending the time to look at the changes happening in our industry. The goal was to show that even when tools reach end of life or vendor shift direction, you can stay ahead of that curve by building in flexibility into your data stack, and Aqua Data Studio helps make that possible by giving you a stable, multi-platform environment that adapts as your database landscape evolves. And I appreciate your time and hope the session gave you some clear next steps for moving forward with confidence. Have a great day, everybody.